This video will have spoilers for Black Lagoon and will have some heavy content in it, so consider this your warning. In my previous Black Lagoon video, I talked about how the anime does a great job of setting up an action scene and how it gives the viewer a satisfying payoff. Another thing Black Lagoon does fairly well is using real-world issues in their stories. And one story arc that touches on a very serious issue is the Vampire Twins arc. In this arc, our heroes, the Lagoon Company, takes on a supporting role, while the leading lady, Balalaika, takes center stage. She's the leader of Hotel Moscow, the Russian mafia, in Runipur. A lot of her comrades are being murdered by an assassin, although Butcher might be a lot more appropriate. She wants revenge for her slain comrades and believes the attacks on her men were from one of the many crime organizations in their playground. Hotel Moscow is one of the most dominant crime organizations in Runipur, and the competition will be more than happy to see them weaken and taken out of the game. Balalaika, throughout the whole series, is shown to be loyal to the men that works under her. A lot of them were men that she served alongside with within the Red Army in Afghanistan. She was their commanding officer. For context, the Soviet war in Afghanistan was their Vietnam War. It lasted for about 20 years, with them ultimately withdrawing from the country without really nothing to show for it. And if this sounds familiar, well, moving on. The war ended in 1989, and the Soviet Union was collapsing, and it became the Russian Federation in 1991. Balalaika saw the writings on the wall, after her own country ignored and casted aside many of those that fought in Afghanistan. They had no more purpose now, and she was going to give them a purpose. She rallied those abandoned soldiers to fight under her one more time, and they became integrated with Hotel Moscow, where they eventually ended up where they are in the series. For those that have served in the military, there's a close bond that is formed with the people around you. You form a sense of loyalty and companionship with your brothers and sisters in uniform, and especially if you have gone to war with them. That's the kind of bond Balalaika has with her men. She'll do everything she can to avenge them, no matter who their murderers are, even if they are children. It is revealed to Balalaika that the ones who've been slaughtering her comrades were a pair of children named Hansel and Gretel. It doesn't matter to her. She wanted revenge. She shows an incredible amount of loyalty to her men. During that meeting with the heads of the crime organizations in Runipur in the early episode, she was more concerned about finding who killed her men instead of maintaining the peace between all of her underworld competition. That was the kind of woman Balalaika was. Loyalty to the end, and at any cost. During her hunt for Hansel and Gretel, she had to look at incredibly dark and evil material to discover their identity. And I won't say what it is because I don't want this video to be taken down or flagged, but if you know, you know. But it is here where she discovered that they are Romanian children that were abuse survivors that were used to create PDF file content and Snuffy the Elephant movies for the morally depraved. Knowing all that and even forming a temporary truce with the Triads and telling her comrades that it was time for war. Hansel and Gretel aren't their actual names. They're just aliases given to them by their abusers. If they had actual names given to them by their actual parents, that was long forgotten. As mentioned earlier, they are Romanian. During the late 1960s, the communist government of Romania saw a decline in its population that wasn't recovering after World War II. The government wanted to increase its population and enacted pro-natalist policies that would remove any and all kinds of contraceptives off the shelves to encourage childbirth. This policy worked for a few years, but due to stagnant and declining economy, many parents couldn't afford to raise their children, and they had them sent off to state-run orphanages. Declining birth rates is an issue that many countries are dealing with across the globe today. Regardless if it's a right-wing or left-wing government that's in charge, it is a problem for many of them to deal with. And I will keep my thoughts on it to myself. But I find it interesting that it is an issue that every kind of government faces, no matter what the time period is. After the fall of the communist government in Romania, also in 1989, a lot of these Romanian orphans fell into the hands of European criminal organizations, like the Italian Mafia, who was later revealed to be the ones that deployed the Vampire Twins in an effort to take out their enemies from the shadows, and to avoid blame. The twins from a young age were forced into doing things no child or even adult should do. They saw others like them abused and were abused themselves, to the point that they became sadistic killers that believe they can only survive by killing others, thus the vampire twins moniker. On top of that, their minds are so far gone that both twins sometimes swap their personalities with each other. Hansel becomes Gretel, Gretel becomes Hansel. They switch clothing and their wigs to become each other. When Rock was trying to show them genuine love and affection that they've never received in their lives after hearing their horrific story, it made him sad and depressed. And wanting to cheer him up, they flashed him. They're underage children. This is wrong. And this was twisted in so many ways that the only way they knew how to show affection was doing that. You have to have a heart of stone to not feel bad for these twins. The abuse they went through and how twisted they are, it's not their fault. But sadly, they're too far gone to be fixed. And I don't think any amount of therapy or counseling would ever repair them. Of course, it doesn't mean they deserve what happens to them at the end of this arc. I find it interesting how the twins and Balalaika were created from the fall of their country's government in some form. Romania was within the Soviet sphere of influence, and with its slow collapse during the late 1980s, countries around it were also collapsing. A lot of those countries were ripe for other countries and even criminal organizations to take advantage of during that period. Balalaika was a soldier who came back home from war with nothing to show for besides scars that cover her body and a country that didn't care for her anymore. She goes to join a criminal organization that can give her a purpose, a new battlefront where she can command her men once again. The twins were orphans that fell into the hands of criminals when the government that was supposed to take care of them was too busy dealing with revolutions to stay in power. The criminals that adopted them only wanted them for their sick and depraved pleasure and profit off of them. They both have a lot in common. Both lived under Soviet rule and both experienced the collapse of their country's government and fell into the arms of criminals. Both have to kill as a part of their jobs, but what separates them is their motivation. Balalaika does what she does because she wanted to give her comrades a purpose after her government failed them. The vampire twins were given purpose by twisted people that abused and warped their minds and depraved them of a childhood that they will never receive. When Hansel is confronted by Balalaika at the end of the arc, he is given a slow and painful death. His cries of pain goes unanswered. She watches him die in front of her as he bleeds out. When it's over, she radios to her most trusted lieutenant, who says that was just bone-chilling. And it was. Killing a child in anime is something that often invokes a reaction, usually a sad one, and after learning the twins' background story, you can't help but feel bad for them, even if they are deranged killers. So, did Gretel get to escape with the help of Lagoon Company? No. Hotel Moscow has deep pockets, and people can be influenced to do things. Gretel was shot in the back of her head, and was given a quick death. Something that wasn't given to Hansel. At least, one of the twins didn't get to suffer slowly. Her final moments were at peace, looking at the blue ocean sky. The Vampire Twins arc, while still full of the over-the-top action inspired by Hollywood action movies, really showed how messed up the criminal world really is. Children like Hansel and Gretel might be a work of fiction, but the exploitation of children by criminal organizations and evil individuals is a real thing. And how Rock wants to protect those children is often difficult for a single individual to do. Balalaika returning home from war and her government not taking care of them is also a thing that happens today. The lack of care given to them after their service is finished is awful, and not every veteran gets the care they deserve. Balalaika carries both physical and mental scars from war that she will never get over. The damage to them isn't always physical, but mental as well, and those are often the worst ones. Her actions in this arc is hard to justify, but it is very in line with her character, and are a good example why Black Lagoon has fairly well-written characters. They have a lot of layers of complexity that is interesting to dive into, on top of their over-the-top nature and attitude. While the action scenes are what the series is known for, Black Lagoon does a great job of using real-world issues that are often hard to discuss into its story. If you peel away the action, each arc has some kind of message, undertone, or theme it is hinting at the viewer, and I think it does a great job of doing it. Black Lagoon is a series that doesn't hold your hand. It treats it audience maturely and shows us that the world can be a cruel and cold place, but it is still beautiful and has good people wanting to do good in this world. A very special thank you to Clayton Santos for doing the artwork for this video. He also did the artwork for the previous Black Lagoon video as well. Please check his stuff out. The idea for this video came from a comment left on a previous video. And if you have any suggestions, please leave them below. And please leave a like and subscribe if you haven't. And see you next time in the Idle Room. Bye!